Hello, welcome to this news event held by the law firm Piper Wolf Carr Kane Conway and Wise, or Piper Wolf for short. You'll be hearing from three speakers today, and then we'll open the floor for questions during the Q&A period. The Q&A period will be for reporters only, and if you wish to ask a question, you can use the raise your hand function, and your line will be unmuted when it's your turn to ask a question. For more info, go to brokerwatch.com where you can find the news release and filing, and we'll also go ahead and drop a direct link to the news release landing page in the chat here. Put that in right now. Okay, and as I mentioned, you'll be hearing from three speakers today. First, Jason Kane, partner at Piper Wolf. Second will be Mark Fox, victim of the Crew Capital Ponzi scheme. And third will be Albert Copeland, attorney at Piper Wolf. So let's begin with our first speaker. It's Jason Kane, partner at Piper Wolf.
Thank you for joining this news event. My name is Jason Kane, and I'm a partner at the law firm Piper Wolf Carr Kane Conway and Wise, or Piper Wolf for short. Today, we filed a statement of claim with the American Arbitration Association against the Centerville, Utah-based advisory firm Wealth Navigation Advisors, or WNA, which does business under the name Oak Lane Advisors. We filed on behalf of our client, Mark Fox, who you'll hear from in a moment. The charges include breach of fiduciary duty, failure to supervise, negligence, breach of contract, and more. This action follows the complaint filed by the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, in October of 2022. This all centers around the $30 million Crew Capital Ponzi scheme, a fraudulent investment scheme created by Stephen Romney Swensen. Swensen was WNA's registered investment advisor. In June 2022, after spending his victims' money on airplanes, multiple mistresses, houses, cars, and an extravagant lifestyle, Swensen took his own life when the scheme was exposed. Swensen left behind a wake of destruction, and we are working to put the pieces back together so his victims can salvage some part of their life savings. It's tragic that a registered investment advisor would ruin the lives of over 50 clients and friends to bankroll his airplanes and mistresses. It's also unbelievable that it could happen under WNA's nose without anyone raising a red flag. Swensen pitched his clients and friends on investing in Crew Capital, and many of them did. The returns he promised were too good to be true. That's because they were not real. Everything about Crew Capital was completely fabricated, as Swensen made Ponzi-type payments of returns to investors to keep the fraud going. Those returns were funded from the investments of other victims. Mark Fox is the first victim to go public with his story. He and his wife lost $850,000 because of Swensen's fraud and WNA's failure to detect the multi-million-dollar swindle occurring in plain sight. WNA's failure to supervise Swensen directly caused Mark and his wife to suffer substantial financial losses and emotional distress. They were forced to alter retirement plans, and Mark's wife now receives regular psychiatric treatment to cope with the aftermath of this fraudulent scheme. Imagine working hard your whole life to save for retirement, only to learn that you have to start from square one. It's just devastating. That concludes my statement. I look forward to your questions during the Q&A session.
Again, that was Jason Kane, partner at Piper Wolf. Let's proceed to our second speaker, Mark Fox, victim of the Crew Capital Ponzi scheme.
Thank you all for attending this press event to hear our story. My name is Mark Fox, and my family and I are still reeling from the shock. It turned out that our own trusted investment advisor, who I considered a very good friend, had been ripping us off for years. It really makes us question who we can trust and directly impacts our retirement plans. I met Swensen 25 years ago at the aviation hangar at Ogden City Airport in Utah. We were both pilots and quickly became friends. He eventually recruited me as a client, and I followed him as he moved from firm to firm over the last 20 years. Most recently at WNA from 2018 to 2022. We would meet to review our investments. The reports would display Crew Capital logo in the name of the documents, and I believe the Crew Capital Fund was just one of the several investment opportunities available to us. But in 2022, I discovered the truth about Swensen and the Crew Capital Fund. Our entire investment was gone. To trick us, Swensen maintained websites like crewfunds.com, where you could log in and you could view your account balances and all these fictitious returns. The website showed daily accrual and returns and annual returns on the anniversary date of the investment, but everything on those websites was entirely false. We later learned Swensen used Crew Capital money to buy and maintain several airplanes, buy homes and vehicles, and bankroll his lavish lifestyle, including at least 2 mistresses. Just talking about it, I'm filled with disgust. To say that was a shock and that we are furious would be a gross understatement. My family and I have been pushed to the brink, and now at age 61, I'm trying to figure out who I can trust. I hope that by sharing our story, it might help prevent others from finding themselves in the same boat, from having their lives upended by someone who they thought was their friend. Thank you. That concludes my statement.
Again, that was Mark Fox. And lastly, let's hear from our third speaker, Albert Copeland, attorney at Piper Wolf.
Thank you for joining this news event. My name is Albert Copeland, and I'm an attorney at Piper Wolf. I'm going to dig into some of the legal and technical details of the case. For over 10 years, Swensen was engaged in selling investment interest in Crew Capital. Swensen gave other investors, like Mark Fox, the exact same pitch about Crew Capital. That it was a safe investment fund that paid guaranteed minimum returns of 5% annually, with possible annual returns as high as 10%, depending on how well the S&P 500 performed that year. Swensen said that Crew Capital could provide the Foxes with retirement income and that it was a, quote, bucket one investment, meaning that it was the safest investment in their portfolios. Swensen was registered as an investment advisor with WNA in 2019 when he approached Mark about Crew Capital. Trusting his longtime friend, Mark and his wife invested $850,000, a significant portion of their life savings, in the Crew Capital Fund. On June 6, 2022, Swensen committed suicide. Like many other victims, Mark learned the full extent of Swensen's decade-long scheme when reading the SEC's complaint filed against Crew Capital and Swensen's estate in October 2022. Beyond the lies, false promises, fake returns, and fictitious websites, the SEC also alleged that Swensen provided falsified documentation about Crew Capital to investors. These documents falsely describe Crew Capital as a, quote, actively managed portfolio that invested both in senior secured floating rate loans and options on the S&P 500 index. Documents falsely showed that Pacific Investment Management Company, LLC, or PIMCO, was a sub-advisor to Crew Capital. The SEC also claimed that Swensen provided investors with falsified PIMCO documents to make it appear that PIMCO and Crew Capital together managed a senior floating rate fund. Swensen allegedly doctored actual PIMCO documentation for PIMCO's senior floating rate fund by adding his Crew Capital logo and the words Crew and the words Crew Capital Group in various places. But in fact, PIMCO never had a relationship with either Swensen or Crew Capital. Swensen's representations to Mark and the other victims about Crew Capital were completely fabricated. Neither Swensen nor Crew Capital invested money that investors put into the fund. Neither Swensen nor Crew Capital had any affiliation with PIMCO. Instead, Swensen used investor funds as his personal piggy bank. He made Ponzi-like payments of returns to investors, which were funded from their own capital investment and from the capital investments of other victims. W&A knew, or should have known, that Swensen was soliciting clients such as Mark and his wife for illegal outside business activity. Swensen, as a registered investment advisor, owed a fiduciary duty and a duty of undivided loyalty to his W&A clients. As a fiduciary, W&A had a duty to act in the Fox's best interest. Yet, Swensen's fraudulent activity went undetected for years under W&A's watch. And W&A only terminated Swensen for failing to disclose an unapproved outside business activity on June 6, 2022, the very same day he committed suicide. Had W&A properly supervised Swensen, its own investment advisor, none of this would have happened to the Foxes. Swensen scammed hardworking people out of nearly $30 million. How could this go on for over a decade without someone noticing? Swensen's victims deserve answers, and they deserve justice. That is the end of my statement. I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Again, that was Albert Copeland, attorney at Piper Wolf. That takes us to the Q&A portion of the call. If you wish to ask a question, use the raise your hand function, and your line will be unmuted when it's your turn to ask a question. And as a reminder, the Q&A period is for reporters only. If you have any issues with your own audio or the raise your hand function, you can use the text-based Q&A box, and we'll do our best to get to those questions as well. And before we begin, I want to mention that a video recording of this news event will be available later today online. It'll be at brokerwatch.com along with the other media materials. So that's brokerwatch.com, no spaces. So it looks like we've got a two-part question in our Q&A box here, and it's from Melanie Holt at WFTV. So this is for the attorneys. She says, if I understand you correctly, you're seeking arbitration for Mr. Fox. And also, what is the status of the SEC complaint against the estate of Stephen Romney Swensen?
Yeah, this is Jason Kane. I'll certainly answer that. Yes, we have filed arbitration in the AAA arbitration forum. And we've done that today, and we're looking forward to getting that process started to help Mr. Fox. As far as the SEC complaint goes, I believe they've filed. I don't know, Albert, are you aware if there's been any updates since October when they filed that?
The SEC complaint was filed October 2022. The investigation is ongoing, and what's important here about the investigation is it could potentially take years. And even today, May 23rd, 2023, months afterwards, Mark, us, we're all still in shock. So we are anxious to move forward with this case, to have justice for the Fox family, because we know that answers will not come quickly, but we can take affirmative action now to seek justice on their behalf.
Great. Well, I'm not seeing, oh, I spoke too soon. It looks like we've got our next question coming from Kimball Benion at NBC and Telemundo, Utah. So Kimball, please unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. My question is, if I understand correctly, you're in this case only representing Mr. Fox?
That is correct.
Okay. And do you have any idea about the number of other potential victims out there, and what and if there might be further legal action sought on their behalf as well?
We do. We believe there are at least 50 other families who we believe need our help. One of the things I was thinking about prior today is, when you become a victim of a Ponzi scheme, there's no manual to get your money back. And, Albert and I believe that our firm is in a position to, to assist as many folks as we possibly can. And we look forward to doing that.
Okay, thank you. And just as a reminder, I think we just had someone join. We want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to pose their questions while we've got all of our speakers together. So if you wish to ask a question, you can use the raise your hand function, and your line will be unmuted when it's your turn to ask a question. And just as a reminder, the Q&A period is for reporters only. If you're having any issues with your audio or the raise your hand function, there is a text-based Q&A box, and you can put your question there, and we'll do our best to get to those questions too.
Yeah, one of the things I just want to mention, and Mark touched on this, and I touched on it a little bit in my statement, is, the impact of this is just so far beyond just financial. It's the psychological impact that I think is just as damaging. It truly is devastating. And when I'm representing victims of Ponzi schemes, obviously I'm focused on getting as much money back as I possibly can. But I also find myself just listening and understanding what they're going through. It's that breach of trust that I think is, incredibly difficult for people to deal with. I wanted to mention that, and wonder if, Mark, you had any comments about that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that my wife's seeing a psychiatrist over it. It's just, I'm probably one of the oldest guys on the call, but it's doing what we were supposed to do, save 15% of your paycheck since I got out of college. That's what me and my wife did. And you're supposed to be my friend.
Yeah.
All right. Our next question is coming from Pat Reevy at KSL. Pat, please unmute yourself.
My question is for Mr. Fox. You mentioned that you were friends with Swensen for 25 years. Did you ever notice a change in his behavior, or do you think he friended you just for this scheme, or at what point do you think there was this greed or took over with him?
I mean, that's a super good question. Something that's really been bothering me. I know more than 10 years ago, because we were pretty good friends. I know he was making salary personally was over $1 million legally, right? So he was probably making 2 to 3 million a year. Last year, it's like the answers that we'll never get is why. Where's the greed? I mean, why did he have to? I mean, he legitimately was making a lot of money. I helped him with business consulting. I helped him with a couple businesses and stuff that never made sense. And in fact, I learned after his death that one of the advisors in his group was his brother-in-law, and I didn't know that till I read the obituary. And all of them agreed, is like, there's no way he spent that much money. They didn't know about the mistresses and stuff, I guess, but he didn't appear to have that lifestyle. He had some airplanes, but not $30 million worth of spending. So everyone that was close to him that I know were 100% confident that the money was in stock somewhere, that it was in funds and it was invested. And it was just, I asked him specifically, his relatives and the advisors, it's like, did he do anything illegal? They said, well, he didn't file the proper paperwork. He can start his own fund, but yeah, what he did was wrong. He knew he was going to go to jail, but they were all confident the money was still there somewhere. So when the SEC filed the thing in October that said he didn't invest a penny of it, that was horrible. That's still the most shocking as to where did he spend the money, what did he do with it. So I never saw a change in his behavior like that. He was always extremely nice guy. Like I said, he's one of my not super personal friends, but from a business point of view, and like I said, I've known him since I met his father when he first started. Father kind of started him in the company, and a lot of answers we're never going to get.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
All right. We are going to take our next question. It's from Darby Sparks at KUTV News. This is in the Q&A box. It's a two-part question. Do you believe WNA knew Stephen was swindling funds? If not, how could they have known? In other words, how were they being negligent? And then the second part is, what was the relationship with the person who received nearly $1 million in Stephen's will?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that I certainly wanted to touch on. This went on for 11 years. To be able to run a Ponzi scheme of this magnitude for 11 years while supposedly being supervised by brokerage firms and WNA, it's just astonishing. And, someone clearly took their eye off of the supervision ball. They have an obligation to supervise, and they clearly failed. Mark and Albert both touched on the fact that there was a sophisticated website involved. He's sending statements. All of these things are supposed to be being supervised. And for him to be able to get away with this for over a decade, the last 4 years of which are at WNA, is astonishing. And it's just a clear failure of supervision.
Great. We have a follow-up question coming from Melanie Holt at WFTV. It's for Mr. Fox. She writes, $850,000 is significant loss. What has this done to your family's future financial security? And also, I heard you mention that you had a personal relationship with Mr. Swensen. Is that how you were drawn into this investment? When did you first learn you had been deceived?
So I met him about 25 years ago. I have a small little experimental airplane that I built, and we were hangar mates. We just by circumstance through the rental agency ended up having airplanes in the same hangar. And then I learned that he was a financial advisor, and I was like, okay, well, I need one because I don't have time to do that, and that's not my profession. So I beat him up for 3 years of just constantly, how do I know this money's guaranteed? What is the government acronym behind it? Who's protecting me? And he'd always show me this stuff. He'd always show me these cash reserves. This is true. I'm not talking about just crew funds, but all of our stuff, right? So I even made a comment to him like, I guess I know how your business model works. You let somebody beat you up for 3 years with details, then you trust the person after that. So to be honest, when we got to crew fund, he had changed agencies multiple times, and each time I asked him, why do you keep moving? And the answer was always something to the effect of, it's better for you, or I got better rates for us, or something along those lines. Actually, when we got to crew fund, that's the last investment I invested in. So I already have 20 plus years with this guy. I had no reason to really question the legitimacy of that, right? So we just had bucket one, as was mentioned earlier. That was where once we started to retire, that's where we pull money out of. And Steve said, you will always pull money from bucket one. In the future, you'll just take other bucket money and convert it into bucket one money. So he was planning to have us draw money from crew funds forever. We've never drawn $1 out of it. So what it's done is, my wife was going to retire this year. She, as I mentioned before, she can't now, or doesn't want to. She's not comfortable. And it was 850,000, but it was really 1.1 million because of the earnings that we got over the years. And part of the salt in the wound is that I'm paying taxes on interest income on money that doesn't exist. So I'm in the middle of fighting right now with IRS and how do you legally do that. And I think Jason said it, there's not a good playbook for this, and there sure isn't when you start talking to financial attorneys of, oh, I got this big loss, what can I do on taxes? And so we're still messing with that. I'm trying to be a half cup full guy. I got a device that I invented that hopefully was really successful, and hopefully this is rounding error in the future maybe, right? But I'm trying to concentrate on that so much as just poor me, which, because you can go down that rabbit hole deep. So I'm trying not to do it too much. So it's had an impact to us. We don't have any kids, but the closest thing we have to kid is a great niece. She's 14 years old. And we promised her that we'd pay for her college. I don't know if I can do that anymore.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions in the queue at this time, but just as a final reminder, I'll check the queue again in just a moment. If you do wish to ask a question, you can use the raise your hand function or the text-based Q&A box, and we'll take a peek in a moment. But right now, I want to make sure you know where to get more information following today's news event. To connect with any of the speakers you've heard from today or to get more info, you can contact Max Carlin at 703-276-3255. We did drop a link to the news release, which is pretty much a landing page. That link is in the chat box, so you can check there or go to brokerwatch.com. That's also where a recording of this news event will be posted later today after it's done processing and such. So I'm looking at the queue one more time. I'm not seeing any further questions. So we'd like to thank everybody for joining this news event today, held by the law firm Piper Wolf. And that will conclude today's news event. Thank you.